Hey guys, tonight we board a quiet red-eye flight out of Kuala Lumpur, March 8th, 2014. It's late, you're sleepy, and honestly, this flight couldn't be more ordinary. You slip into your seat on Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, buckle up, lean your head back, and stare at the cabin ceiling as that soft yellow glow flickers slightly overhead. You're cruising into darkness with 238 strangers, most of them already nodding off. Outside your window, the tarmac hums, the engines grumble, then roar, and you feel the subtle lift as the nose rises and your stomach drops for just a second. You're airborne. The city fades behind you. The sea waits ahead. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your city and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where in the world you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're 38 minutes into the flight when the sky swallows you whole. No turbulence, no screaming, no fireball, just silence. One moment, your plane is a blip on military radar cruising over the South China Sea. The next, gone, like someone flipped a cosmic switch and deleted you from the screen. And weirdly enough, no one even notices at first. MH370 departs at 12:41 a.m. local time, climbing smoothly toward its cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. Air traffic control signs off as you leave Malaysian airspace. "Good night, Malaysian 370, the pilot says with practiced calm. And then nothing. The Vietnamese controller's waiting to greet you. Never hear a thing. You just don't show up. This isn't totally uncommon. Flights sometimes switch frequencies or cross boundaries with minor delays. But after 5 minutes, it's concerning. After 15, it's chilling. By 2 a.m., the airline begins calling around. Still hopeful. Maybe it's a radio error. Maybe you turned back. Maybe there's some mix-up with radar coverage. It'll take 6 full hours before anyone officially declares you missing. By then, you're already far beyond where anyone thinks to look. The early morning headlines say, "Contact lost." Search planes head toward the Gulf of Thailand. Fishing boats are rerouted. Even oil rig workers report seeing something strange in the sky around that time, but nothing's found. Here's the kicker. If the plane had crashed where radar lost it, there would have been debris, floating seats, shredded fuselage, those eerily indestructible oxygen masks. Instead, the surface of the sea stays smooth, flat as glass. You are, for all practical purposes, erased. That erasure kicks off one of the greatest aviation mysteries in modern history. Think about it. You're flying in 2014. The world is mapped, tagged, and tracked to the inch. Your phone tells you when your Amazon package crosses the street. And yet, somehow, a Boeing 777, one of the most advanced aircraft ever built, just vanishes with 239 people on board. Historians still argue whether the delay in launching full-scale search operations cost crucial time. Some say wreckage would have floated for days if teams had known where to look. Others believe it made no difference because you were already somewhere no one would have thought to search for years. What's most unsettling in these early hours isn't just that you're missing. It's how cleanly you disappeared. No SOS, no transponder ping, no distress call, just a gentle curve left on radar. Then the lights go out. And while the world is still waking up to the headlines, someone, somewhere knows more. The military, the satellite engineers, the governments with silent radar sweeps. Their lips? Tightly sealed, at least for now. There's even a fringe theory that circulates quickly. One you hear whispered on late-night forums and dark corner podcasts. They say the plane entered a ghost zone, a rare atmospheric corridor where electromagnetic signals bend, and time doesn't quite behave. To be clear, there's no science backing this, but it sticks in the mind, like static on a late-night TV. Still, the official search begins normally enough. Concentric circles on a map, rescue beacons deployed, radio frequencies scanned. Classic checklist stuff, only there's nothing to find. And with each hour that ticks by, your odds of being rescued tick lower. Back at the airport, loved ones gather in a holding room with no windows. Reporters hover, a whiteboard is wheeled in. Time passes, tension thickens. There's no wreckage, no black box pings, not even a single floating suitcase. It starts to feel less like a crash and more like an abduction. By the 24-hour mark, people are openly comparing this to Amelia Earhart. That's how dire it is. But unlike Amelia, you weren't alone. You weren't flying a single prop relic into uncharted territory. You were on a modern jet with 2 engines, a professional crew, real-time GPS, and hundreds of eyes on you. So where did you go? You don't know it yet, but the answer lies not in the ocean but above it, miles overhead, orbiting silently, is a British satellite named Inmarsat 3F1, and it caught your ghost. Sort of. But for now, the world still thinks you're somewhere beneath the waves, waiting to be found. Families wait by the phone, the ocean is scoured by Navy ships, and everyone from air traffic control to seasoned pilots asks the same quiet question. How does a plane just disappear? And deep down, there's a second question. What if it didn't? You're still up there somewhere. At least that's what some want to believe. See, about 38 minutes after takeoff, your aircraft makes a strange move. You're cruising at 35,000 feet when suddenly you turn left. Not a gentle curve, not a standard holding pattern, a sharp, deliberate bank. On civilian radar, this shows up clearly, but within seconds you vanish from that screen entirely. Military radar picks you up for a little while longer, and what it sees is deeply weird. Instead of continuing on the safe, expected route toward Beijing, your plane doubles back over Malaysia, veers toward the Andaman Sea, then flies a winding high-altitude path like a ghost ship on autopilot. It's as if someone suddenly decided to go rogue, but without telling anyone. And then you vanish again. At 2:22 a.m., even military radar loses you, just like that. No squawk code, no mayday, no we've got a problem moment. The transponder turned off. The communication systems disabled. All the tools meant to keep you safe are deliberately silenced. That blip on the radar, the last little dot marking your presence, flickers and goes dark. And that's where this starts to feel less like a tragedy and more like a magic trick. Except there's no magician. Just a very large, very real jetliner now somewhere doing something and no one can say for sure what or why. Historians still argue whether this turn was pre-programmed in the flight system or done manually by someone in the cockpit. Either way, it wasn't an accident. You don't bank left, fly across a continent, and kill the plane's ID by mistake. Whoever was flying at that point knew what they were doing. Now here's the chilling part. For a few minutes after the deviation, your plane may have crossed paths with other aircraft. In fact, a pilot of another Malaysia Airlines flight radioed MH370 during this dark period, trying to make contact after controllers had failed. The only response, static, maybe some mumbling. The pilot couldn't make out the words, but later said it sounded like someone was talking, then cut off. So let's recap. You turn unexpectedly. You silence your own electronics. You fly hundreds of miles in the wrong direction. Then you disappear entirely, again. Meanwhile, on the ground, confusion spreads like fog. Flight control in Vietnam assumes Malaysian authorities are tracking you. Malaysia assumes Vietnam has it covered. It's a dead zone of responsibility, where everyone thinks someone else is in charge. By dawn, that illusion collapses. The global search begins in earnest, but in the wrong place. Rescue teams scour the South China Sea, unaware you've already flown thousands of kilometers away from there. It's like searching the living room for your phone when it's actually in your neighbor's freezer. The question hanging in the air, why fly that way at all? One theory, among many, is that you were avoiding radar. Whoever was at the controls might have known just how low to fly, just how wide to turn, to avoid detection. Flying dark like that is difficult, but not impossible. Military aircraft do it. So can smugglers. But commercial pilots, not unless they're trained, intentional, and extremely calm under pressure. And that turns the spotlight toward the cockpit. The pilot, Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, was a veteran with over 18,000 hours of flight experience. By all accounts, calm, competent, and respected. But investigators later find some deeply unsettling things in his personal life. More on that in a later section. The co-pilot, Fariq Abdul Hamid, was young, still gaining experience, and this was his first time co-piloting a 777 on an international route without a senior captain watching. Now here's a quirky fact. During a 2011 flight, Fariq and another co-pilot let two female passengers enter the cockpit mid-flight for selfies and chit-chat. Airlines issued warnings, of course. But it paints a picture. Relaxed cockpit culture, maybe too relaxed. Does that mean foul play? No, but it raises a crucial question. If something happened in the cockpit that night, something that caused one pilot to take control, how long would it take the other to stop them? 5 seconds? 30? What if he never even had the chance? Some speculate that depressurization could have rendered everyone unconscious within minutes. A ghost flight, they call it, where the plane keeps flying while everyone on board is asleep or dead. Creepy thought. You're dozing off in your seat, the lights are dim, everything seems normal, and meanwhile the cockpit is slowly being starved of oxygen. You never even know what hit you. Of course, that's just one theory. Another suggests deliberate action, that one of the pilots, or someone else on board, planned this entire thing, down to the left turn, down to the silence. Historians still argue whether this was a hijacking, a suicide, or an accident wrapped in an intentional disguise. Meanwhile, back on Earth, air traffic control starts doing the aviation version of a frantic "Find My iPhone." They retrace every signal, every radar return, every moment of the flight they can verify. But the problem is, they don't have much to go on. Your last confirmed position is off the coast of Malaysia. After that, the trail goes cold. No radio, no flight path, no ping. Or so it seems. Because as we'll see in the next section, while radar may have lost you, a satellite above the Indian Ocean hears something. Not your voice, not your data, just a quiet digital handshake. Then another, then 5 more. And just like that, the mystery deepens. Because you're not gone. Not yet. You're still out there, flying. Somewhere. By now you're off the radar, off the map, and quite possibly off the edge of every assumption air traffic control has ever made. But here's the twist. Just when the world starts to assume you're at the bottom of the sea, floating somewhere in silence, a humble British satellite quietly raises its hand. Orbiting 22,000 miles above Earth is Inmarsat 3F1, a communication satellite usually used for ship navigation and plane data links. Nothing flashy, just background tech. But tonight, it becomes your only witness. Because even though your transponder was shut off and your comms were silenced, your satellite data unit, SDU, tried to connect. At 2:25 a.m., minutes after you vanished from radar, the SDU pings Inmarsat's network. It's not saying anything specific, just a handshake, a little "Hey, I'm here." And it doesn't stop. Every hour for the next 6 hours, the plane sends out one of these strange, almost subconscious blips. 7 in total. The last one comes at 8:19 a.m., and then, finally, nothing. That last handshake, by the way, only happens when the system powers back on, which implies something happened, a power drop, a reset, maybe an attempted landing, maybe a crash, maybe something much stranger. And here's where things get deliciously technical. The satellite doesn't track location like GPS, but it does measure something called burst timing offset, basically how long the signal takes to bounce back. From that, engineers can estimate how far away the plane was at each handshake. Not where, just how far from the satellite. You end up with 7 invisible rings stretching out across the Indian Ocean, each representing the possible distance of MH370 at that time. Now imagine trying to solve a murder using only the sound of a door creaking. No footprints, no fingerprints, just an echo. That's what the investigators are working with. They call it the arc theory, and it becomes the only real lead. 2 potential flight paths emerge, one arcing north toward Kazakhstan, the other south into the open void of the Indian Ocean. Guess which one the data supports? The southern arc, toward nowhere. Toward nothing, toward oblivion. Historians still argue whether the northern path was ever a true possibility or just a red herring. But eventually, after crunching terabytes of data and looping in every math nerd with a satellite dish, the consensus emerges. You flew for another 6 hours after disappearing from radar, steadily southward toward the most remote ocean on Earth. That's right, you're in the air long after everyone assumed you'd already crashed. Here's the strange thing. Nobody knows what happened during those 6 hours. You're not transmitting coordinates, cockpit audio, or cabin pressure data. Just those 7 ghostly handshakes echoing upward into space. It's the digital equivalent of whispering, "Still here," every hour until your voice finally fades. And then, silent. At 8:19 a.m., the final ping is received. Analysts refer to this as the partial handshake. It's different. Unfinished. It doesn't complete the usual protocol. Why? One possibility. It was cut short because your plane disintegrated, or hit the ocean, or lost all power, or all three. There's even a fringe idea that the final ping was triggered by someone trying to restart the system. A desperate act, maybe, just before the end. Like reaching out to say goodbye. Or to say, "Remember us." Now here's a fun fact that feels like a cosmic prank. The Indian Ocean's 7th arc, where your final ping likely originated, is notoriously difficult to search. It's deep, cold, unmapped, and about as accessible as the surface of the moon. Waves there can reach 60 feet. The seafloor is a mix of underwater mountains, sediment, and tectonic fractures that swallow sonar like candy. It's the worst possible place for a plane to crash, and the perfect place to hide one. Search ships begin mapping the arc in 2015. Their sonar sweeps mile after mile of ocean floor, hoping to find your wreckage. And while they do find things, old shipwrecks, underwater volcanoes, a suspiciously fridge-shaped container full of nothing, the plane itself, no sign. At this point, investigators begin reconstructing the most likely scenario. You're flying straight and level for hours. There's no course correction, no evidence of altitude changes, just a slow, cold march southward until fuel runs dry. And once that happens, the engines flame out, the lights go off, and the aircraft, one of the safest in aviation history, becomes an enormous 300-ton glider. A powerless descent, pitch black, maybe automated, maybe not. Historians still argue whether it spiraled into the sea nose first or floated down in a long, eerie glide. Either way, the end came silently. And then, like that, the world's largest mystery sinks beneath the waves. Except it doesn't. Not really. Because even though your voice is gone, your echoes linger. And very soon, bits and pieces of you will begin washing ashore. You're thousands of kilometers from your intended path now, far from Beijing, far from land, far from logic. And yet, slowly, stubbornly, you begin to return. Not in full, not in one piece, but in fragments. The first one appears more than a year after you vanish. July 2015. A man named Johnny Baig is walking along the shore of Réunion Island, a sleepy French territory off the coast of Madagascar. He's on cleanup duty, nothing dramatic, when he sees a strange barnacle-encrusted hunk of metal tangled in the seaweed. It's almost poetic in a bleak way. The piece has a quiet curve, fiberglass edges, a salt-bitten strangeness. It looks like part of a wing, because it is. A flaperon, to be exact, a hinged wing panel that helps control an aircraft's movement during flight. And once the experts examine it, the verdict is clear. This came from MH370. You made landfall, after all. Just not quite how anyone expected. The discovery sends shockwaves through aviation circles. Until now, MH370 was just a mathematical ghost. Arcs, pings, theories. But this is evidence. It's real. Tangible, something you can touch, and, crucially, it fits the model. The ocean currents from the 7th arc could absolutely carry debris to Réunion in that amount of time. The simulation checks out. Nature agrees with math, for once. But you don't stop there. Over the next few years, more pieces begin to drift ashore. Mozambique, South Africa, Madagascar, even Tanzania. Over 30 items in total. Sections of engine cowling, seat frame fragments, Inner panels with serial numbers half sanded off by the sea. Some are definitely from MH370, others, maybe. We still don't know. Historians still argue whether the lack of bodies or life jackets in these debris fields is a clue, or just the cruel nature of ocean physics. Because here's the haunting reality. This is what modern disappearance looks like. Not a flash, not a crater, just nothing, followed by a breadcrumb trail scattered over years and continents. A quiet unraveling. The forensic teams pore over the pieces, desperate for signs, scorch marks, bullet holes, soot, blast damage, anything. But no. The flaperon's trailing edge is broken, but smoothly. Experts say it suggests one of two things. Either a controlled glide or a hard spiral into the ocean at speed. The difference matters, because one scenario suggests intent, and the other, chaos. Still, not everyone buys the official arc theory. After all, this entire search is based on handshakes, not GPS, not radar. Just bursts of data between a ghost plane and a satellite that wasn't even designed to track location. It's like trying to find a missing person based on the echo of their footsteps from the moon. Here's a fringe tidbit. In early 2014, a group of conspiracy-minded researchers began cross-referencing known radar pings with supposed military exercises happening in the Indian Ocean at the time. The theory? The plane was shot down, accidentally or otherwise, and the search was redirected as a cover-up. There's no solid proof, but no disproof either. Meanwhile, families of the 239 passengers ride a carousel of hope and despair. Every flaperon, every sonar sweep, every announcement from a podium is another roller coaster drop. Imagine being in that limbo for a decade. One family, still waiting in China, keeps their son's room untouched, his shoes by the door, his toothbrush dry in a cup. Because until they see more than a rusted wing, he isn't gone. Not really. Another family flies to every press conference across Asia, clutching a banner that reads, "Where is the plane?" No question mark, because it isn't a question anymore. It's a demand. And back in Malaysia, every political scandal tied to the investigation, every leaked transcript, every delayed report fuels a deep and growing mistrust. The question that won't die, are they hiding something? Historians still argue whether the authorities withheld early radar data to avoid revealing national defense weaknesses, or something darker. You don't need to be a tinfoil hat theorist to ask why civilian radar lost you, but military radar tracked you for over an hour and said nothing. And still, no wreckage, no cockpit voice recorder, no final moments. Just more flotsam, like clues from a dream you can't quite remember. And it makes people wonder, if this can happen once, couldn't it happen again? Because you weren't flying over a war zone. You weren't hijacked in a jungle. You were on a routine international flight, full of people checking emails, eating peanuts, watching in-flight movies. And now you're part of modern mythology. The Bermuda Triangle used to be the king of unexplained aviation stories. Now, you are. Flight MH370 is the 21st century mystery. The irony? The plane was equipped with one of the most advanced communication systems in the sky, and yet one button, one deliberate move, was enough to pull it out of existence. Like turning off a light, so the world waits. Oceanographers refine drift models. Private contractors launch new deep-sea submersibles. Family members become amateur sleuths, learning more about satellite telemetry than most engineers. But the Ark, the oceanic tomb, it keeps its secrets, for now. And yet, you keep returning. So here you are again, surfacing where no one asked, but where everyone is watching. You've gone from vanishing act to breadcrumb oracle. Each piece of you that washes ashore whispers a new kind of cruelty. You didn't imagine me. I was real. I was here. One piece in particular causes a stir. It's found in Mozambique, a piece of horizontal stabilizer. Scribbled on it, someone had written, "No step." There's something gut-punching about that. A maintenance warning meant to prevent damage, still clear as day. The ocean couldn't erase it. Time couldn't wear it off. And yet, for all that clarity, there's still no sign of why you went down. Investigators fly out to collect it. Their report, highly likely from MH370, a phrase that recurs like a chorus, highly likely, not confirmed, not certain, but close enough for headlines and heartbreak. You're becoming a scavenger's puzzle now. Experts study barnacle growth on the flaperon to estimate how long it was drifting. Did it float the whole time? Did it sink and resurface? Historians still argue whether ocean currents alone can explain the debris path, or whether something or someone steered you farther. In fact, let's zoom out for a second. There's an entire cottage industry now of armchair analysts, engineers, pilots, code breakers, even ocean hobbyists, all obsessively running simulations, syncing satellite clocks, watching ocean drift videos like it's Game of Thrones Season 9. You're not just a mystery anymore, you're a movement. Forums light up at 3 a.m. with new theories. The cabin was depressurized to disable the passengers. A fire broke out, and the pilots were heroes steering it away from population. Hijackers took control but ran out of fuel. The pilot staged a deliberate suicide mission. Every theory has a champion. Every champion has enemies. One name keeps rising through the smoke. Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah. Your pilot. Your final human contact. Experienced, respected, friendly, too friendly. Some say yes. He had a home flight simulator, and someone, maybe him, maybe not, ran practice flights toward the Indian Ocean, eerily similar to MH370's arc. The files were deleted but later recovered. One simulated route ends within range of the 7th arc. That's spooky, no matter how you slice it. The official line doesn't prove anything, but unofficially, it's very weird. Historians still argue whether the simulator flights were innocent hobbyism or a dress rehearsal. And here's where things get psychological. Captain Zahari had no known history of mental illness. He was active on social media, posted cat videos, loved his Boeing 777, but toward the end there were signs of isolation, a strained marriage, political frustration. One fringe theory suggests the flight was a final protest, a political statement, intended not to kill, but to vanish so completely it would shame the government. It's a reach, but not impossible. Other theories shift blame. Some eye the co-pilot, Farik Abdul Hamid. He was young, on his first 777 training flight. Calm, composed. But then again, why does the flight go dark right as he takes over radio duties? Coincidence, maybe, maybe not. And then there's the cargo. On board was 2.5 tons of lithium-ion batteries, stashed alongside other electronics. Lithium fires are nasty, hard to detect until it's too late. Could they have started a fire mid-air? It's plausible, it's been tested, but no emergency call was made, no smoke alerts. Still, fire is one of the few explanations that don't require foul play. It could explain the silent failure of systems, the detour, even the long arc southward if autopilot was set after the crew was incapacitated. But the longer this goes, the more you feel it. There's no clean version of this story. Every explanation requires something weird, either a deliberate act or an absurd coincidence, a silent hijack or an invisible malfunction, a rogue pilot or a ghost in the machine. And still you drift. Sometimes children find your pieces. Imagine that, playing on a beach and stumbling across the remains of a lost future. You're part of modern folklore now. Not quite a ghost story, but not just a tragedy either. And here's the kicker, governments begin to pull back. The official search is called off in 2017. After 1,046 days and nearly $150 million, they walk away. The plane, they say, is unrecoverable. Public outrage is quiet, tired. The kind of anger you exhale after holding your breath for too long. But the families, they don't quit. A US-based company, Ocean Infinity, offers to search on their own terms. No find, no fee. They bring autonomous underwater vehicles, robotic subs that scan the seabed in silence. They cover over 112,000 square kilometers. That's larger than Portugal. And what do they find? Nothing. No wings, no fuselage, no flight recorders. Just sea, just silence. Just you, still not home. By now, you're something more than a flight. You're an idea. a riddle no one can stop solving, even when the puzzle has no edge pieces and half the box is missing. People don't ask, what happened to MH370? Anymore. They ask, why can't we know? And that somehow feels worse. The map of your search has become a gallery of almosts. They find an old shipwreck. Nope, 19th century. An oddly shaped metal plate. Just a shipping container. Hundreds of sonar contacts catalogued, cross-checked, and dismissed. One sonar scan looks promising until they realize it's a geological formation, a rock that just happens to resemble a crumpled fuselage. Even nature is mocking the effort now. Historians still argue whether the search area needs to shift farther north or whether the seventh arc itself is flawed. After all, the satellite data assumes the plane's equipment was working correctly. But what if it wasn't? What if the burst frequency offset, the mathematical clue that anchors the whole theory, was just a glitch, 1 degree off, and your resting place might be thousands of kilometers away, still lost, still waiting? Meanwhile, deep-sea technology improves. Every year, more of the Indian Ocean becomes visible. What was once a mysterious abyss is now a pixelated blueprint. But here's the twist. The more we uncover, the less you appear. Oceanographers begin mapping strange undersea features, deep ravines, volcanic ridges, trenches darker than midnight. Some of them could swallow a 777 hole and never leave a trace. And some believe that they already did. Here's a fringe tidbit. One private search effort theorized that MH370 landed intact on the ocean and later broke apart as it sank, gently, without the violence of impact. If true, it would explain why the beacon from the black boxes never activated. They weren't destroyed. They were simply never jarred hard enough to wake up. It's eerie, isn't it? The idea that something can vanish quietly, politely, into the deep. Still, you'd think by now we'd know more. We've tracked whales across oceans, mapped Mars, even predicted the spin of neutron stars 50 million light-years away. And yet we lost you, somewhere on Earth. It's humbling. And then, in 2018, the Malaysian government releases its final report. 1,000 pages long. Detailed, clinical, exhaustive, and profoundly unsatisfying. It concludes that the plane was manually diverted, but it stops short of naming anyone. There's no smoking gun. No cockpit voice, no last-minute mayday, just a lot of could have, might have. We cannot rule out. One line stands out. The possibility of intervention by a third party cannot be excluded. That's the official way of saying, we got nothing. It feels like being handed a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle and told, by the way, the final photo doesn't exist. Good luck. Families read the report and cry, not because it brings closure, but because it doesn't. They hold vigils, light candles shaped like airplanes. They sing lullabies in Mandarin, Malay, Tamil, and French. Every culture has a way to speak to the lost, to ask for peace, to promise they're not forgotten. But peace is slippery. Because each theory, whether it's mechanical failure, rogue pilot, hijacking, or cosmic accident, leads to a different truth. And each truth leaves someone blameless and someone guilty, one thread that keeps unraveling. The idea of a massive cover-up. Maybe military radar saw more than they admitted. Maybe international cooperation was stifled by ego and politics. After all, if a plane can be silently hijacked or misdirected, it reveals terrifying holes in global aviation security. Nobody likes terrifying holes. So maybe the story of MH370 isn't just about the plane. Maybe it's about our fear of not knowing, of being reminded that for all our satellites and smartphones and real-time updates, we're still fragile. One malfunction, one wrong turn, and suddenly you're a dot on a radar. Then not even that. You become a phrase, disappeared without a trace. The last person to hear from you was a Vietnamese air traffic controller, trying to raise the plane on frequency after it failed to check in. They never got a reply. All that remained was silence. And silence doesn't give statements. The world keeps spinning. Airlines quietly update their protocols. Now planes must report their positions more frequently. Some install real-time streaming black boxes designed to ping constantly from anywhere, even the ocean floor. They do it for you. But it's a retroactive tribute, a fix for a hole you already fell through. And still people search. One independent researcher builds a full-scale model of the flight using public data and crowd-sourced information. He maps it second by second, imagines the cabin growing colder, darker, the passengers unconscious as the engines whine toward nowhere. He doesn't sleep much. Others chase shadows. A piece of debris washes up in Madagascar with alleged burn marks. Another has handwritten symbols scratched into it. Probably meaningless. Maybe not. Historians still argue whether the ongoing obsession with your fate is a form of collective trauma or a necessary ritual to make meaning out of the senseless. And you? You keep hovering between fact and legend. A modern Atlantis. A Flying Dutchman with jet engines. People sometimes say you were swallowed by the void, but that gives the void too much credit. You weren't eaten. You slipped through a crack in reality, and now the crack won't close. You can almost hear it now. The soft creak of cold metal shifting in the deep. The final resting place of MH370, wherever it may be, is silent. Still, tucked beneath layers of salt and silt, far beyond the reach of daylight. But above, you're still echoing. Not just through sonar and search grids, but through every conversation that ends with, "What really happened to that flight?" At this point, the world has split into two kinds of people. Those who believe you'll eventually be found, and those who think you're already exactly where you were meant to disappear. That second group? They lean toward the conspiratorial edge of things, and oh, it's a lively neighborhood down there. Some claim the plane was intercepted, maybe even shot down, accidentally or otherwise, by a military power trying to protect sensitive airspace. Maybe you veered too close to Diego Garcia, the secretive U.S. base in the Indian Ocean. And maybe someone panicked. You can't prove it, but you can't disprove it either. The perfect fuel for a conspiracy campfire. One theory even suggests the passengers were alive for hours after the flight disappeared, held somewhere, perhaps for interrogation or ransom, that they died not from impact, but from neglect, abandonment, and slow oxygen loss. Fringe. Yes, but remember, truth doesn't always get to wear the lab coat. Sometimes it's hiding behind a curtain whispering things you'd rather not believe. Meanwhile, in the more grounded corners of aviation, simulations continue. Analysts at Boeing, Airbus, and various crash investigation boards attempt to reconstruct the last moments. The challenge is not in plotting where you went, it's in answering why. And that's the part that drives people mad. Because your route wasn't random. It had intention. The turn back west, the long glide south. It's the pattern of someone making choices, someone in control, until the very last fuel drop. Historians still argue whether that person was fully conscious of what they were doing or simply running on programmed autopilot, a human ghost inside a machine. There's one simulation in particular that haunts people. It maps a controlled descent. Not a nosedive, not a stall. A slow, smooth, almost careful glide into the ocean, suggesting the pilot, whoever they were, was awake and focused to the very end. That changes things. That makes the crash feel intentional, not an accident, a plan. Which brings us back to Captain Zahari, again. His defenders insist he was a scapegoat, that his home simulator flights prove nothing, that his personal life, while private, offered no real warning signs. They say investigators latched onto him because they needed someone to blame, and he was the only one left. After all, there's no evidence he struggled at the controls, no cryptic final messages, no angry manifesto. Just a flight plan, then nothing. But others believe that silence is the loudest clue of all. There's a haunting piece of radio chatter just before the plane leaves Malaysian airspace. ATC says, "Good night, Malaysian 370. And Zahari responds with, "Good night, Malaysia 370. Not the correct wording. It's a small thing. An aviation nerd detail. But in a world where seconds matter, that deviation feels off. As if he already knew no one else would be talking to him. It's circumstantial. Everything is circumstantial, and that's what's so exhausting. Because you can't build closure on circumstance. And that's exactly where the families remain, trapped in a purgatory of half-facts and plausible maybes. For them, this isn't folklore. It's not an unsolved puzzle. It's a seat at the dinner table that's never filled. It's birthdays missed. Empty voicemail boxes. A smell they still catch in passing. Their grief has calcified into routine. Annual memorials, paper lanterns over the sea, placards engraved with names, not bodies, all of it beautifully heartbreaking and wholly unsatisfying. Some family members turn to activism. Others avoid the news entirely. A few, just a few, begin to believe that the truth is being hidden on purpose. Not out of malice, but out of fear. Fear that the full story would shake the aviation world to its core. Because here's the most chilling idea of all. Maybe the system we trust, this global network of air traffic, transponders, GPS, radar, and international coordination, isn't as bulletproof as we thought. Maybe a single plane can still vanish in the 21st century. And maybe the next one will too. So the world keeps watching the skies. But it also watches the water. It scans beaches in Madagascar, in Mauritius, in Mozambique. It rechecks ocean drift models. If debris landed here in 2015, where might the fuselage be by now? The math is constantly shifting, but you don't shift anymore. Wherever you are, you're not moving. And ironically, it's your stillness that causes the chaos up here. You've created a void so wide, people fall into it and don't come out. And as more time passes, new flights go missing. New disasters take the headlines. But MH370 still lingers. A wound that doesn't close. Because unlike most crashes, this one didn't leave behind a disaster site to process, a voice recorder to dissect, or a final mayday to immortalize. It left behind an ellipsis, a three-dot sentence that never finishes. And that's why you haunt us. Not just because you were lost, but because you never ended. At this point in the journey, you've become something stranger than a mystery. You're a mirror. Everyone who looks for you ends up finding pieces of themselves. Fear, hope, obsession, the desire to believe, or the desperate need to explain. And explanations, as it turns out, are often just stories wearing a lab coat. So the stories keep coming. One says a fire in the cargo hold knocked out communications. Lithium batteries overheating, sparking a cabin full of toxic smoke. The pilot turns back, tries to save the plane, but succumbs. The plane flies on, ghost-like, until it runs out of fuel and dips into the ocean. Sounds logical, checks some boxes, but not all of them. Because even if the fire theory explains the silence, it doesn't explain the deliberate turns. The programmed altitude changes, the precise deviation from air corridors. That's not chaos. That's choreography. Then there's the hijacking theory, not the Hollywood kind, where someone storms the cockpit with a broken tray table and a demand for Cuba. No, this is subtler, quiet. Some speculate that remote hacking is possible, that a sophisticated group gained access to the plane's flight systems, altered its course, and either botched the landing or never intended to land it at all. Too science fiction? Maybe. But consider this. Aviation cybersecurity wasn't exactly front-page news in 2014. Backdoors existed. Safeguards didn't. Still, there's no proof. There never is. Even now, scholars debate whether the lack of debris suggests a soft water entry, maybe even a controlled ditching. But that requires a skilled pilot at the helm until the end. Which brings us right back to where we started. Intent. And intent is hard to measure when all you have are shadows. Let's talk about those shadows. In 2020, a French journalist named Florence de Changy published a book with a bold claim. MH370 was intercepted and destroyed during a covert operation involving the US military. The plane was supposedly carrying sensitive cargo, possibly electronics bound for China, and was targeted to prevent a leak of classified tech. Wild? Yes. But de Changy interviewed insiders, whistleblowers, radar technicians who insist there's more to the official story. That military radar traces from the night in question show the plane's flight path veering sharply before vanishing, not due south but northwest toward Diego Garcia. Historians still argue whether these alternate radar pings are authentic or just artifacts of eager misinterpretation. But here's what's telling. The Malaysian military did detect something on radar after the civilian system lost you. They claimed it was possibly MH370. But they didn't alert air traffic control, didn't scramble jets, didn't say much of anything really, and when people asked why, the answers were foggy, unclear, being reviewed, under investigation. There's only so many times you can hear under investigation before you start suspecting undercover. Let's step out of the classified folder for a moment and into the ocean again. The Indian Ocean remains your cold cathedral, and every few months another piece of something floats ashore, mostly in Africa. A wing flap here, a panel there, always eroded, sun-bleached, sometimes scratched by coral, sometimes stamped with serial numbers that confirm what everyone already knows. Yes, it's from MH370. Yes, it's real. No, it doesn't explain anything new. It's like finding one shoe every 6 months. A shoe that confirms someone vanished, but not how or why. And somehow each piece makes the absence feel even larger. You know what's even more unsettling? There are entire forests of plane wreckage underwater, hundreds of known and unknown crashes resting in the depths. But MH370 is different because we watched it vanish in real time, saw the last blip, heard the last word, then nothing. That makes it personal, intimate almost, like witnessing a disappearance right in front of you and realizing you can't rewind or enhance the frame. There's a term investigators use, controlled flight into terrain. It means the pilot was steering, the plane was responding, and yet somehow it crashed anyway. A perfect metaphor for this entire story. We are the pilot now, and we're flying directly into mystery. Each government has its own version of what probably happened. Malaysia's final report hedges its bets. Australia insists it searched the most likely zone. France demands more transparency. China mourns quietly, but pushes for answers in diplomatic channels. No one agrees, because agreement would mean stopping, and no one's ready for that. The internet, of course, never stops. Online forums host millions of posts, simulations, debates, wild theories about wormholes, quantum slipstreams, and invisible cloaking fields. Someone even claimed MH370 flew into a time rift created by the LHC. You laugh, but then you look around and wonder why some of these fringe guesses feel no more absurd than the official ones. After all, what's crazier? A black hole over the Indian Ocean, or a modern aircraft vanishing mid-flight and no one being able to prove why? Both feel equally impossible, and yet one of them happened. You did. So we're left with this looping logic. If we don't know what happened, it could be anything. And if it could be anything, then we'll never know what really happened. That circular reasoning, that Mobius strip of grief, is what traps the world, keeps it up at night, keeps us wondering what it must have felt like to sit in seat 14C, staring out a dark window, unaware that history was folding in around you. You didn't just disappear. You ignited 1,000 explanations, each one plausible, each one lacking. And that's the scariest thing about vanishing, the way it multiplies. You wouldn't think silence could get louder, but somehow, with each passing year, yours does. It's the kind that doesn't echo but presses. The kind of silence you feel in your teeth. A hum behind the eyes. And yet the world refuses to let go. Not because we expect a resolution, we don't, not really, but because we need to chase the shape of the hole you left behind. It makes us feel like we still have control, like we're not just specks crawling across a blue planet where metal giants fall from the sky and simply vanish. Somewhere out there, someone still gets alerts for MH370 debris found. It's not hope, not anymore. It's habit. Like checking your front door is locked 3 times, even when you know it is. But every now and then, the alerts deliver. In 2015, a barnacle-encrusted flaperon washed up on Reunion Island. Identified, confirmed. H370. It was a solid clue, but also the beginning of another question. Because the barnacle growth on the wing part. It told a confusing story. Some biologists argue the growth pattern suggests the part was floating for weeks, not months or years. Others say the species found on it would only grow in certain water temperatures, which didn't align perfectly with the official search area. Historians still argue whether the flaperon drifted unusually or whether it never left the ocean in the first place. But either way, it showed us something undeniable. You're not gone. You're out there. And that somehow made it worse, because now we knew your death wasn't theoretical. It had weight, texture. You had scraped coral. You had cradled sea life. You'd become part of the ocean's slow mechanics. Other pieces came later, shards of the interior wall, a seat cushion, part of the engine cowling. They scattered across Madagascar, Mozambique, and Tanzania. Each new find reignited interest, but never offered certainty. It's like trying to understand a symphony by listening to the sound of a single note. Meanwhile, satellite companies were pressured to release more data. One image, taken just hours after the plane went missing, shows 3 long, faint objects floating near the suspected crash zone, long enough to be fuselage-sized. But the photo resolution was grainy. No one could say for sure. And by the time investigators reached the coordinates, the objects had moved or sunk. Even now, some amateur sleuths comb those satellite archives frame by frame, pixel by pixel, hoping to find the one clue everyone missed. Their forums are wild places, equal parts digital detective agency and grief support group. They speak in aviation code, post theories in paragraphs, debate the tensile strength of carbon fiber. But beneath the jargon, there's always a kind of reverence. Because this isn't just about solving a mystery. It's about honoring a disappearance that feels unjust. And it does feel unjust, doesn't it? Modernity promised us certain things, that satellites would watch everything, that transponders could never be turned off, that no plane could vanish without a trace. You shattered all of that. In the years that followed, aviation changed. Quietly, slowly. Satellite tracking is being implemented more broadly, flight data streaming in real time, more cross-border cooperation on radar systems. But it all came after. The way the best medicine always arrives just after the patient is gone. There's a quiet consensus now among investigators. MH370 was a controlled descent into the southern Indian Ocean, likely piloted until fuel depletion, then either gently glided into the sea or descended steeply, depending on which simulation you believe. The search area has shifted multiple times. Search ships have combed tens of thousands of square kilometers. Underwater drones have mapped the ocean floor in exquisite detail. And still nothing. No wreckage field, no black boxes, no cockpit, just that ever-expanding library of theories. Some researchers now propose looking outside the official search zone. Maybe the autopilot flew farther than expected. Maybe an updraft altered your descent angle. Maybe you're lying on a steep slope, camouflaged by undersea ridges. Maybe, always maybe, that word has become your ghost. Meanwhile, the world's attention wavers. Another crash, another conflict, a new virus, 100 new headlines. But MH370, you drift at the bottom of every feed, not loud but unshakable. You're the browser tab we never close. And every year on March 8th, the names are read again. The families gather. Paper lanterns float into the night, messages written in marker. Come home. We haven't forgotten. We still love you. Some of the families refuse to give up hope. They say until every inch of ocean is searched, you can't be declared lost. Not really. Others have made peace, or something like it. Their grief has settled like dust on an unused seat. But none of them has closure. Because closure requires understanding. And all we have is the sound of a door slamming shut from the other side. You, MH370, have become bigger than yourself. Not just a plane, not just a tragedy. You are the reminder that not everything is retrievable, that some stories don't get endings, that in a world of data and surveillance and non-stop noise, it's still possible to fall off the map. So now here we are, hovering at the edge of this story, squinting into the darkness, hoping for a shape, a signal, a sign. But you, MH370, never blink back. We've searched across time zones and ocean floors. We've plotted satellite arcs and modeled fuel burns. We've even tried to reverse engineer heartbreak into science. But all that effort, all that intelligence, has only led us here to a truth that hums like radar static. You were here, and now you're not. And somehow, that absence is louder than your presence ever was. The truth is, even with all the tech and experts and billions of dollars, the sea still wins. It hides what it wants to hide, and it's very, very good at it. Take a moment and picture it, right now. The Indian Ocean at 2 a.m. winds low. Stars out, miles of black water, unbroken by ship or light. You're gliding at 35,000 feet, but below you, it's just that endless oil-slick calm. A few scattered fishing boats. A moon that doesn't care what you carry in your cargo hold or cockpit. No cameras, no tweets, just sky and sea and you. And then nothing. Even the final act of the story, your presumed descent, has no witnesses. If you did go into the ocean, no satellite caught the splash. No microphone registered the impact. It was like tossing a pebble into an ocean of velvet. Historians still argue whether the plane glided or spiraled, broke apart in air or upon impact. But all versions end the same way, submerged deep below, wrapped in silence colder than death. Somewhere in those depths may lie the truth. A cockpit with answers frozen in its black boxes. A final log. A cabin full of stories that never reach their end. But for now, we're left on land, necks craned, listening to the absence. In 2023, renewed efforts were proposed. New sonar equipment, improved drift modeling, deeper dives. Ocean Infinity, the company that last searched in 2018, has expressed interest in going back. They believe, with a bit of luck, they can find you. And yet, luck is a strange companion for a scientific mission. It's like trying to find a single lost thought in the ocean of your mind. A whisper you once heard, now buried by the noise of everything else. And there's something else no one talks about much, guilt. Not just from governments or airlines, but us. The passengers of a planet that couldn't keep track of its own. That let a jetliner fade into black without even a proper goodbye. So we build memorials. We light candles. We tell stories like this one, trying to stitch together the sky and the sea with words. It helps. A little. But the truth is, you've become more idea than object, more symbol than aircraft. You're no longer just a Boeing. You're a modern fable, a question without punctuation. And what do we do with unsolved stories? We keep them close. We wrap them in podcasts and documentaries. We post theories on Reddit. We create Google Earth overlays. We obsess. We mourn. We mythologize. It's how humans cope. We turn mystery into ritual. We make the unknowable feel like a friend. And so MH370, we whisper your name like a spell, not because we think it will bring you back, but because saying it reminds us that sometimes we don't get closure, sometimes we only get questions. You are not the first plane to disappear, but you might be the last one to do so in front of the whole world. You remind us that even in 2014, even with apps and satellites and high-tech engines, we are still vulnerable to the void. You remind us that humans aren't made to understand every disappearance. Some things slip away, and the slipping is what haunts us. So now, as we dim the lights for good tonight, as the hum of the story fades into the background, just imagine, somewhere far beneath the surface, your fuselage lies still. Maybe coral has claimed it. Maybe fish drift lazily through your cabin. Maybe your wings are bent at strange angles, like arms trying to shield something. But even now your story floats above the water, above us, waiting unfinished. Word count 1044. Wind down 300 words. Now take a deep breath. Let the heaviness of this tale settle into your bones, not as a burden, but as a quiet weight you can carry into your dreams. Feel the air around you soften. Listen to the faint sound of your own breath, like a tide coming in and out. Sometimes the most terrifying part of a story is not what we know, but what we don't. And yet that space, those shadows, are also where wonder lives. You might still feel the echo of jet engines in your ears, or picture the quiet flicker of cabin lights before a descent into darkness. That's okay. That means you were listening. That means you were here. So let the story drift now. Let it sink gently, like a lantern on a still lake. The kind that flickers once, then goes out, carried by the current, far away from sight. You're safe. You're here. And while the world may not always offer answers, it still offers nights like this, where we lie still and let the mystery speak, just for a while. Thanks for staying with me tonight.